The rest of the nuns settled in Dalhousie on the opposite side of the Himalayan chain. Before celebrating the office of the Buddhist faith, they make a ritual tour of the bungalow, which is both their home and their temple. These nuns belong to the Kagyu order, the order of the yogis. It was founded by the famous ascetic Marpa and, above all, by Milarepa, famous for his works of initiation and sublime poetry. The encounter with the Tibetan world reveals the division of Tantric Buddhism into several orders. The four main orders group almost all the followers, both monks and hermits. The monks here are Nyingma. This name means the elders. Their order was the first to be founded in Tibet. Today, in India, their most venerated guru is this man, who, like many Mongols, is beardless and whose long hair is tied back into a bun, in the fashion for Tibetan men. He is a sage who is married. He is father of a family. His Holiness, Dudjom Rinpoche. It is mainly against the Nyingma lamas that some Westerners have made accusations of immorality, witchcraft, perversion of Buddhism, and other criticisms. They disappear of their own accord when one spends some time with men of the caliber of Khentse Rinpoche, Kagyu Rinpoche, and Dudjom Rinpoche. Here you can see Dudjom Rinpoche celebrating a tantric initiation ritual, or abhisheka. The end of this ritual is too sacred, too secret to be filmed. But even in the initial part of this ritual, we are taken to the very heart of the authentic Tibetan tradition. I would like to remain silent and spare you the commentaries, so that you may, at least as spectators, have the direct experience of this Tibetan tradition. The Sakyapa order, literally the monks from the monastery of Sakya, was historically the second to appear after the Nyingma. Their leader today is the Dakti Sakya Lama Trizin Rinpoche. He is quite a young man, and he too is beardless and wears his long hair tied back. Despite his youth, Trizin Rinpoche is gifted with some of the parapsychological powers that Westerners have marveled at in certain lamas. These powers are in fact of secondary importance to authentic spiritual life and true wisdom, as the miraculous charisma of certain Christian mystics is to their state of holiness. The Sakyapa is a non-reformed order like the Nyingma and the Kagyu. On the other hand, the Yellow Hats, the Gelug, who descended from the reform of Tsongkhapa, constitute the official church of Tibet, the one to which the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama belong. Perhaps one could compare the relationship between the Yellow Hats and the Red Hats to the relationship between the Protestants and Catholics as it is today. Though a few important differences and memories of past difficulties still prevail, there is great mutual respect and a sincere desire for closer connection. On the other hand, the distinction between the three non-reformed orders reminds one rather of the main Catholic orders: Benedictines, Franciscans, and Dominicans. Their conviction is of belonging to the same church, but each one is attached to its particular tradition and to its founder. The order of the Kagyupas, in which yoga holds an important place, is itself divided into Dugpa Kagyu and Karma Kagyu. The head of the latter is His Holiness Gyalwa Karmapa. He lives in Sikkim, and he is also a Tulku recognized during his early childhood to be the indisputable successor to the first Karmapa. Even though he is only 40, he is perhaps the most famous of the Tibetan pontiffs after the Dalai Lama. Of all the sages, whether Hindu, Muslim, Sufi, or Buddhist, he is the most impressive sage with whom I have had the privilege to stay. My own experiences close to him, the radiance of his presence, and his silent influence explain the depth of recognition and veneration that are accorded to him. Behind the hieratic mask of self-possession and inner strength, all these Tibetan sages overflow with compassion that is characteristic of Mahayana Buddhists. Their religious life begins with the vow of the Bodhisattva, which is not to dissociate one's own salvation from the liberation of all beings chained to the illusion of birth and death. But the Tibetan church most familiar to foreigners is probably the Yellow Hat, or Gelugpa. Amongst the abbots and the high dignitaries with whom it prides itself, two are particularly respected: the two masters or tutors who educated the Dalai Lama. The younger of the two, Kyabje Trijang Rinpoche, is a lama of exceptional reputation, distinction, and intelligence. The way this monk expresses his devotion when consulting him on an important problem concerning his spiritual life is a sign not of civility, but of the refined etiquette of these humble Tibetans before the princes of the church. Those who have been a disciple have not only received the most enlightening answers to the most vital questions from their master, but also the transmission of a force, an energy which cannot be compared to any other known experience. Only they know that the disciple's fervor is neither fear nor obsequiousness, but love and gratitude. They also know that every gesture that is made in the Master's presence is a ritual. All food taken with the Master is a sacrament. And this silence, shared with the Master, is a communion with the truth of that which is. The elder of the Dalai Lama's instructors, Kyabje Ling Rinpoche, is the living example of these great Gelugpa metaphysicians whose perfect mastery of the Prajnaparamita teachings and various tantras slowly prepared them to reach the highest summit of meditation, meditation without form, non-dualistic, beyond all images and representation. Dharamsala, in the north of the Indian state of Punjab, above the valley of Kangra. This is where the Dalai Lama lives, a monk who is 30 years old. Through his title, the Dalai Lama was already famous a long time before he took refuge in India in 1959. Here he became accessible to admirers, to the curious, to the scholars and the experts. Remote successor of the former Tsongkhapa, recognized as the chief political figure in Tibet by the Mongol emperors, labeled as a living god by journalists the world over, considered to be the reincarnation of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the 14th Dalai Lama, for all the Tibetan refugees, is the living symbol of their lost country and their religion which will never be lost. But this sovereign, for whom their devotion extends to collecting the dust upon which his holy feet tread, this head of state in exile, more famous than many of the prime ministers of powerful countries, is not a king, not an emperor, not a dictator, nor the head of a political party, but a Buddhist monk who submits to all the monastic rules of the sutras, including celibacy and chastity, a monk who prostrates himself with his fellow monks from the Patala in Lhasa and confesses the breach of the rules of his order. Although the Dalai Lama is very learned, as were the 5th and the 13th Dalai Lamas before him, he is not simply a master transmitting initiatic teachings to a handful of disciples. To the Tibetans, he is more than this, much more. He is the precious protector of his people, the Buddha of compassion, incarnated on earth to comfort and to serve mankind. After 7 months living with the yogis, the monks, and the lamas of different Tibetan orders, I am deeply convinced that the Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, as it appears in 1966 in India and in Sikkim, deserves the celebrity it has gained. However, few books, even those written by the most competent specialists, have been able to show why. Because according to the Tibetan masters, the teachings, or the transmission of their tantric and yogic knowledge, is only conceivable within the relationship between a master and disciple, with all the restrictions that this entails and the whole background of mysticism that is implied. For the Tibetans, the spiritual quest and the ardent desire for personal transformation are the qualities which give the right to receive the highest knowledge, whereas so-called objective scientific research or intellectual curiosity, even the most respectful, do not. The Tibetan refugee monks have a keen sense of dignity. They loathe begging, and they loathe selling themselves or their spiritual heritage. Their mantra, symbolic sounds, and mandala, sacred visual symbols, cannot be handed out indiscriminately, and they won't sell their yogic exercises in the marketplace simply to obtain financial support. It seems that the safeguard of this spiritual heritage is the greatest concern of the Dalai Lama, this exiled sovereign, this monk in prayer.